At Gate 17 of Monroe International Airport, the usual rush of travelers moved like a restless tide wheeling luggage, checking screens, juggling coffee and passports. Among the noise and the blur of movement, one man stood still. He wasn't flashy. No entourage, no designer watch screaming for attention. Just a charcoal gray suit, crisply tailored, and a calm confidence that followed him like a shadow. In one hand, he held a slim black carry-on. In the other, a boarding pass marked with one simple fact: First Class, Seat 1A. His name was Dorian Brooks. He stepped toward the boarding lane, quiet, deliberate. A woman in a flight attendant uniform noticed him. Ashley Cole-Young, meticulous and proud of her position, lifted her chin slightly as she caught sight of him. Her scarf was knotted tightly at the neck, hair pinned into a flawless bun. She believed in appearances, in order, in controlling every detail. And as Dorian neared, something about him, his calm, his skin, his silence, triggered a flicker of suspicion in her polished demeanor. "Sir," she said, planting herself in front of him, one hand outstretched as if barring a door. "Boarding for economy is that way." Dorian paused. "First class, 1A, he replied, offering the boarding pass. Ashley took it quickly, giving it only a perfunctory glance. Her surprise flickered, but she masked it with a forced smile and a strained, "Right this way." He stepped past her without comment. But as he disappeared down the jet bridge, Ashley muttered under her breath, just loud enough for a few passengers nearby to hear, "Money doesn't always buy class." A businessman turned his head slightly. A mother bounced her baby higher on her shoulder and frowned. The words drifted like smoke, sharp and unnecessary. Inside the cabin, the warm lighting and plush seats of first class offered a quiet retreat. Dorian found 1A and placed his bag in the overhead bin with quiet precision. He sat, folded his hands in his lap, and closed his eyes not to sleep, but to distance himself. From the terminal, from her words, from what was coming. Ashley entered moments later, her eyes darting to his seat. Something in her still bristled. Maybe it was that he hadn't reacted. Maybe it was that she felt a need to reassert control. Whatever it was, she strode toward him again. "May I see your boarding pass one more time, sir?" Her voice was crisp, louder than necessary. Without a word, Dorian reached into his jacket and handed it to her. She snatched it too fast, her fingers brushing roughly against his. A few heads turned. She stared at the ticket longer than needed, searching for a flaw. But there was none. With an irritated huff, she pushed the ticket back at him, but her hand struck his, and it fell to the floor. A quiet gasp rippled behind them. Dorian bent slowly, retrieved the ticket, and returned to his seat. No visible emotion, just that same stillness. Then, quietly, he said, "You have no idea who you just disrespected." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't angry. But somehow his voice filled the space more than shouting ever could. Ashley's breath hitched. Her professionalism cracked for the briefest moment. "Just following procedure," she said, her voice thin and mechanical. She turned and retreated to the galley, where she stood behind the curtain pretending to check a tablet, her fingers trembling. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Dorian sat motionless. Outside his window, the tarmac shimmered in the morning sun. But inside his chest, a storm brewed. This wasn't new. This wasn't rare. Different uniforms. Same assumptions. Another attendant, older, approached. Her name tag read Helen Carter. She moved gracefully through the cabin, offering water and warm towels. She sensed the tension and gave Dorian a nod of quiet respect. Ashley remained near the front, avoiding his gaze. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 819 to Atlanta. We'll be pushing back shortly." As the aircraft lifted from the runway and banked toward the clouds, the cabin settled into a rhythm of clinking glasses and rustling papers. Dorian declined refreshments. He wasn't hungry. He was waiting. Ashley's unease only grew. She kept seeing his face, hearing his voice. That calm warning. She tried to push it away. He was just another entitled passenger, she told herself. But her heart knew better. Then came the shift. A man in a dark tailored suit made his way into first class from the back of the plane. Not part of the crew. Not a passenger who boarded with the others. He wore a lapel pin with the company's crest. His name was Gregory Vance, Vice President of Operations for the airline. He moved quietly, but his presence radiated authority. When he reached 1A, his posture changed. He bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Brooks," he said with sincere respect. "Let me know if there's anything you need." Dorian nodded once. That was all. Ashley watched the exchange, frozen. Gregory stepped back and made his way to the galley. To her. "Miss Cole," he said, his voice even. She snapped to attention. "There will be a special announcement before landing. Be prepared to assist." "Of course, sir," she said, though her throat was dry. "And after the announcement, you will be called forward." Her stomach dropped. The flight continued in silence. Eyes darted to Dorian now and then, but he remained a pillar of stillness. Not cold, just watchful. And Ashley? Every moment felt longer. Every step past seat 1, it was heavier. As the plane began its descent, the captain's voice returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, please ensure your seatbelts are fastened. We have a brief message before landing." Then, a different voice filled the cabin. "Good afternoon, everyone," Gregory said, microphone in hand. "We're honored to have a very special guest traveling with us today. Seated in 1A is Mr. Dorian Brooks, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Skyward Airlines, the very company operating this flight." A stunned hush fell over the cabin. Gasps. Wide eyes. Whispers. Ashley felt like she'd been punched in the chest. Gregory continued. "Mr. Brooks has built this airline with a vision for excellence, respect, and dignity in the skies. And today, he reminds us all what leadership truly looks like." He handed the mic to Dorian. Dorian stood, unhurried. The cabin watched, spellbound. "Respect," he began, "is not about uniforms, seating charts, or appearances. It's about how we treat each other when we think no one's watching." He scanned the cabin. His eyes landed briefly on Ashley. Not with hate, not even anger, but with a mirror of truth. "I don't ask for special treatment," he said, "but I do expect that every passenger is seen, heard, valued." He returned to his seat. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Ashley stood by the galley, her legs numb. She couldn't breathe. Gregory stepped forward again. "Flight attendant Ashley Cole will be removed from active duty upon landing. An internal review is already underway." The words struck with finality. When the plane landed, no one rushed to disembark. Passengers gave Dorian space, nodding with quiet reverence. As he exited, Ashley stood awkwardly at the front, unsure if she should speak. He looked at her once. No smile, no scowl, just gravity. "You can't undo a moment," he said softly, "but you can decide what kind of person you want to be after it." And then he was gone. In the crew office, Ashley sat alone. Her badge lay on the table beside a disciplinary form. Her hands trembled as she signed the line marked "Acknowledged." The HR supervisor offered her a choice: resign immediately or face a full hearing. She didn't run. She chose the hearing. In the days that followed, Ashley began her suspension. She scrubbed floors in a community shelter, attended workshops on bias and professionalism. Not for show, but because something inside had cracked open. She was no longer a gatekeeper. She was a student. At the shelter, a boy once handed her a crayon drawing of her handing out meals. On it, he wrote in crooked letters, "Thank you for seeing me." She cried in the storage room for 10 minutes. Weeks later, she stood before a review board. No makeup, no tight bond, just herself. "I disrespected a man because I judged him on sight," she said. "I humiliated him because I confused authority with arrogance. I was wrong, and I am learning how not to be." It didn't fire her. They gave her probation, a final warning, and an assignment to new flight attendants on empathy and respect. She returned to the skies. The uniform felt heavier, not with shame, but with meaning. One day, a young trainee panicked over seating a family wrong. Ashley helped quietly, patiently. And when a tired man in wrinkled clothes hesitated at the first-class curtain, Ashley smiled. "Good afternoon, sir." Seat 1A? Right this way. He nodded, surprised. But not as surprised as the world had once been when a silent man in a charcoal suit reminded everyone watching that the true power of leadership is grace. And the greatest seat on any plane isn't 1A. It's the one that sees everyone else.